Thank you so much, and I would love to offer you the rest of my time as well to just continue. Thank you so much. I'm just in awe. It's very important, your work, and I'll try to make it a bit quick. Yes, and again, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you for an amazing day. I mean, so many brilliant speakers, and so much information, and so much to reflect upon. And now I'm going to talk about who controls the algorithms. I might not talk about them, but how this is all affecting us. And I'm going to, my work is focusing on the cultural history of the internet, or maybe the cultural heritage of the algorithm, you could say, even though it is very much within a corporate structure, very much within a corporate institutional system, and was very much built from the beginning. In the 90s, where the politics defined the political landscape, defined the power system, the power structure of the internet, or the infrastructure of the internet. I'm very curious to find out about this history, the cultural history and the political history pre-internet. Because the history of the internet is very much sold as a dream of a network that was supposed to democratize information, knowledge, and communication across cultural and geographical barriers. But it was also, and it is also, a history and a story, and a very much a marketing, a branding strategy that is often only told by the few winners, and is often only for the few winners. I'm very much interested in the history because I'm interested in when these dominating narratives, when they were established. And also because at the same time, indigenous activists around the world, also in Mexico, they tried to build different kind of digital communities with the purpose of giving power to communities instead of just protection of individual rights. But as we know, those who wanted information to be free for themselves and thus as profitable as possible were the ones who won the geopolitical battle of the infrastructure of the internet. And with the words of the French philosopher Barbara Cassin, whom I'm very inspired by, she's an amazing philosopher, and I think you should absolutely dive into her work to know even more about her. And as she says, the internet became the world's largest cultural democracy, just without culture and democracy. So the methods that I use is very much from the arts and the humanities, and I use specifically this theory of deep mimetic frames, and to try to, because when we talk about freedom of speech and privacy and all of that, I think it's more interesting to ask, well, for whom? And I mean, what kind of freedom of speech? And in the freedom of speech that was sold with the obviously from a Silicon Valley perspective, but that we have somehow bought as the narrative of freedom of speech is very American and very also a very, not only American culture, but also a Silicon Valley culture, a very narrow-minded way of looking at freedom of speech, a very neoliberalistic interpretation of freedom of speech that is very much about this me individualism and this very much about Yes, and also this is also very much something that is this is this method is also because it's very difficult to look into the black box, or you can use art to do that. But one thing you can do when you use this method is that you can look into kind of the ideology and the politics and the value concept that is very much built into the many documents that are available in these companies. Could be like terms of conditions, community guidelines regarding, for instance, hate speech, who is victims of these structures and who is the winners of these structures and all of that. I think I will just dive into some of the, just to illustrate this, dive into some of the very or the highly relevant examples, just to, because this is very difficult to analyze because it is an ecosystem of pop culture, politics, digital child culture. Everything is just merging into this chaotic ecosystem. So if we're going to look at just a few examples of how these dominating structure and how these and who is controlling the algorithms, it's not for me to decide the specific persons, but how it can be used as a super weapon. Let me use this example that is, I don't know if you're familiar, how many have seen this Bud Light, you could call it Bud Light Gate in the media? No, not everyone. Okay, but this is a transgender influencer called Dylan Mulvaney, and on April 1st, the popular American beer brand Bud Light sent it was a commercial, an influencer you have a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm American.
Yeah.
One
Great.
misrepresentation of this is Budweiser's not an American company.
No, it's Anheuser-Busch. It's a Swiss company, right?
It's owned by a bigger conglomeration.
Yeah.
So this is a lot bigger. Things aren't going to talk about it.
Thank you for clarifying that. But at least you can't get it here in Denmark. I don't know if you can get it in other countries. I tried to do some research about Bud Light. But still, this was an American campaign and a collaboration with this influencer, Dylan Mulvaney. It's nothing new. I mean, this Bud Light brand, they have been working with within this diversity and inclusion, as they call it, branding since 1998, and also in 2016, 2019, and again in 2020. But still, this triggered like the far right meme violence, you could say. What happened is that after this video was posted, the reason why Dylan Mulvaney was gifted with these 6 beers, this 6-pack with and this special beer with her face on it, is because she celebrated 1 year as a woman. She has, and then afterward, for instance, this. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. What you saw was Kid Rock shooting Bud Light 6-pack, and he posted this video on his Twitter profile. A very angry Kid Rock. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's part of the MTV generation, you could say, a rock star, and he had this half-automatic rifle that he just I don't know. Okay, sorry, but actually, in this video, he's kind of angry, and he's just like, fuck Bud Light and fuck Anheuser-Busch, which is the company behind Budweiser and Bud Light. And a lot of the media outlet, they kind of oversaw that there are, as this professor from San Diego University said, that everyone is talking about Bud Light, but in reality there are two brands at play here, and the other one is the Grand Old Party, or the Republicans. This is this was the three first seconds of the video where you can actually see this MAGA cap, is this Make America Great Again. As you already know, Donald Trump and Kid Rock has kind of collaborated, or you could say that Kid Rock is very much kind of branding Donald Trump's next campaign on his tour in 2022. He had this song "We the People," where it was just stuffed with conservative politics, or maybe not directly, but very much in memes. And what happened afterwards was that there was a lot of buzz surrounding this Bud Light gate, you could say, where Republicans, especially female candidates, are trying to take the spotlight. And as you could see here, Sarah Sanders is Trump's former press secretary, and she's now a Republican governor. And she launched this counter-campaign with the hashtag #RealWoman, featuring other female Republican governors. And this Real Woman video is supposed to be an ad, was shared on Sanders' Twitter profile. And it said, "Today we celebrate all the real female leaders." Of course, she is the real woman. She is and these candidates as well. Okay, what I wanted to say is that I wanted to quote the two New York Times reporters, Katie Gluck and Lisa Lear, who made this analysis that it is very, it is a very dangerous path that these Republican women are entering, because it is a big test of the party's views on sexism and female leaders, but don't call it identity politics. And what they are concluding is that this Bud Light Gate was very effective, a very effective way to distance themselves from identity politics and to stake a position in the culture war. And this Real Woman campaign very much attempts to manifest traditional gender stereotypes that do not challenge but embrace conservative politics, while also positioning themselves as resisting to wokeism. So somehow these meme campaigns, and this, you could also call it meme violence, was used very strategically in this campaign that is, well, you could say has now started in the US and at least in memes. If we look into the MAGA movement, that because in 2016 Trump was very much one of the only politicians that actually used these understreams of far right and extremist groups to mobilize attention and then also voters. And now with the more extreme hashtags, or it has been ongoing for a year almost now, it's not MAGA anymore, but it's dark MAGA, so it's a more extreme version, and Trump coming for revenge. According to the Global Network on Extremism and Technology, this should be seen as a further development of alt-right and an attempt to manifest a crusade. The dark MAGA movement comes out of a bruised online alt-right. The characteristic of this new movement is that it is to call Trump supporters to mainstream emotions, or mainstream their emotion through memes. It's about getting as many people as possible to interact, share, make noise, capture, and hold attention. And memes are very effective in for that purpose. And now, actually a couple of days ago, Joe Biden also launched his campaign with a meme. And this meme, maybe it needs a little bit of explanation because what this is called Dark Brandon. I don't know, are any of you familiar with this meme? Dark Brandon? Yeah. Just to explain it, this is obviously a reference to this dark MAGA movement. But the origin of why Biden is called Brandon is stemmed from a video here. It's Brandon Brown, a NASCAR racer, and I'll just show you the clip. And
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of hang back those first two stages and just watch and learn. What did you learn that helped you there in those closing laps?
Oh my God.
Okay, so what the crowd was actually yelling was "fuck Joe Biden," and the journalist said, "Well, let's go, Brandon." So that became a meme that just exploded, both at sport events and also online. So for other conservatives or people who just want to be part of the joke, or extremist groups, and everyone from other parts of the world could participate. And so this is very much an example of how these, how this ecosystem has, as Whitney Phillips, who also worked with these deep mimetic frames, she calls it a network crisis. How this is very much fueled by this neoliberalistic and this very much this radical space in favor of certain politics, ideologies, and value concept. And I think maybe I should just. I think time's up. We also have a panel discussion, so I'll just show you the last clip that just, I think it maybe a week ago, at a Joe Biden at a speech at the White House.
Y'all think I'm kidding? I'm not. I'm probably the only Irishman ever met who's never had a drink in his life. Anyway, I'd like to make a toast, seriously. At this inflection point in history, let us commit there will be a nation that will embrace light over darkness, truth over lies, and finally, restore the soul of the nation. Hear, hear. Ladies and gentlemen, can I give you that?
Yes.
I'm going to turn this over to Roy. Roy, the podium is yours. I'm going to be fine with your jokes, but I'm not sure about Dark Brandon. All yours, pal.
Okay, so this is this is an example of how this infrastructure is just being part of pop culture, politics, and everything is just very much spilled over into not only American culture, but also something that we talk about very much in Denmark and maybe other parts of the country. And it's not because it's America as a thing, but it would have been the same if Silicon Valley was here and the algorithm was only trained in Danish and was founded in Danish culture, and the conversation was about what happened here in Denmark. So. That was, I think, what I've. Yeah, that was what I had to say. So.